Hey everybody, Jimmy Hinton here, wishing I could join the For Such a Time as This rally, but instead I am up here in Pennsylvania, and I'm actually sitting in my office in the very spot where my sister disclosed to me 8 years ago that she had been sexually abused by our father. I reported him with my mother. The two of us reported immediately to the police. That resulted in an investigation and a very swift arrest. And he was eventually charged and is serving a life sentence in prison. I understand why the For Such a Time as This rally is meeting, and I think it's really important. I think that the Southern Baptist Church, the Southern Baptist Convention, needs to take very swift action because abusers are everywhere. And they come into the churches, and I cannot overstate how quickly and how desperately they want to get back into the churches. These people are wolves. Imagine what it takes to rape a very small child. To actually go through with it and to do it over and over and to do it victim after victim, these are not people who just mess up. These are wolves who are masquerading as sheep in order to steal away the innocence of our children. One of the frustrations that I have as I work with churches and now advocate for victims, one of the biggest frustrations is within the religious community. Churches are very quick to support and encourage the perpetrators, and we give them cover in the church. We think it's unfair to name them by name, and worse yet, we put them in the pulpit. We allow these guys to preach who are raping our children. And we know this for a fact. We know because of the Houston Chronicle articles that came out. I know from the work that I do, I see it all the time, every single day, 7 days a week. I know this to be fact. In fact, the number one question that I get asked by churches when there are allegations of abuse, when it's the church leaders who contact me, the very first question they ask is, how do we support this brother and encourage him and his family? They're talking about the abuser. And I'm like, this is absolute insanity. My first question would be, how do we kick these guys out of the church and keep them at bay and protect the victims that they produced? So I think the Bible is really clear on this, and the Bible always demands swift action when there are wolves among the ranks. So listen to the words of Peter. Peter calls them waterless mists, waterless springs. He calls them people who are born for destruction. He says they despise authority. He says they're irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed. I'm going to read from 2 Peter chapter 2. Peter says, they count it pleasure to revel in the daytime. They are blots and blemishes, reveling in their deceptions, while they feast with you. They have eyes full of adultery, insatiable for sin. They entice unsteady souls. They have hearts trained in greed, accursed children. By the way, Peter doesn't recommend that we give them fellowship and that we keep them out of children's wings and, put accountability partners on them. Peter doesn't recommend that. Neither does Jesus. They always say, avoid such people. Avoid such people. Get rid of them. Kick them out. Keep them away from innocent people. These are not people like you and I. These are people who love to create destruction and disaster and inflict harm on the most innocent of God's creatures. And I think that's why the millstone is very appropriate. Jesus was incredibly graphic. When it came to harming children, Jesus says it would be better for them to have a large millstone tied around their neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. That's a double death. It's a very graphic image if you think about that, because the neck is broken by the millstone, but that's not enough for Jesus. And then they're drowned in the depth of the sea. And Jesus says that would have been better for them to have that happen if they were to cause one of my little ones to stumble. Peter goes on. Peter ends Peter ends it this way. He says, they promise their victims, they promise them freedom, but are themselves slaves of corruption. And then he says the proverb is true. He says, the dog returns to its vomit, and the sow, after washing herself, returns to wallow in the mire. Peter never suggests that we give them Bible studies, that we give them cover in the church, that we put them in the pulpit, that we give them more Bible studies. Peter says, no, these people are corrupt. They're wolves. They revel in the daytime while they feast with you. There's a saying in prison among sex offenders. This is very common. This is kind of a proverb in the prisons. And it goes like this. If you don't have religion, get religion. And what they mean by that is become a Christian or pretend to be a Christian so that when you get released from prison, you can go into the churches. Everybody who I know who works in prisons says about 90% of the churches inside the prisons are made up of sex offenders. So that the inmates who meet in prisons for worship, about 90% of those are made up of sex offenders. At my last visit, when I visited my dad in prison, he was laughing. And in his words, I kid you not, he said, we can't believe how stupid these church volunteers are who come in. He said, they buy it. He's like, we turn on our religious facade. And he said, these volunteers buy it. He's like, we can't believe how incredibly easy it is to make them believe that we're just madly in love with God. That was out of my Father's own mouth. That's who these people are. And so it's really important that the Southern Baptist Convention takes swift action against people who we know are wolves. I can't even believe that we're having this discussion. This blows my mind that this is even up for debate. So I stand behind the For Such a Time as This rally, and you guys are doing an awesome job, and just keep up the good work. I'm encouraged to see what comes out of this convention, and I think if we keep the heat on leaders, we need to hold them accountable, and we need to take action against these wolves because they are destroying our children's lives. You guys enjoy down there, and from Pennsylvania, I'm sending all my love.